Hassan, thank you for coming in. You have a remarkable history, a remarkable family history as well, and innovation and investment, and your work is continuing. I think it's really fascinating that you've got this Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu background. Uh, and you write as a hobby, but you sit on all these boards and all these, just amazing contributions. And so thank you for coming in and sharing your journey with my audience.
Thank you for having me, Steven. It's a pleasure.
So, Hassan, as I mentioned, you're doing all of this pioneering work and you continue to do so, particularly now in investment and frontier technologies. So, what were uh, the inflection points in your life? Maybe two or three. It could have been when you were like 5 years old. It could have been inside or outside the family. Could have been in school, mentors, maybe some of the early career moves, let's say like at Citibank. Like maybe three or two or three inflection points that really defined who you are today and kind of shaped you and inspired you.
Absolutely. I think I think probably, there's been many inflection points throughout my life. I grew up in Saudi Arabia. I left when I was 18. Um, so that leaving and going to the US, I went to Washington, DC for university. That was a big kind of shift and change. Um, but at the same time, I've always had this pliability or adaptability where I can like settle very quickly or blend into whatever environment that I'm into. And so I would say, the things that come to mind when I think about inflection points are definitely when I first moved to New York after university and I started my job at Citigroup as a banker. And that was the first time that, you know, I was kind of off on my own, living independently, making my own money. Um, my family was very proud of me because, in Arab culture, they want your son to be a doctor, banker, lawyer, engineer. So I ticked off at least one of the boxes, and you know, I thought I was doing very important work. Like I'm the lifeblood of the financial system. I'm contributing to society. Um, and about 2 years into that, um, I realized, I just don't feel like this lifestyle is very healthy. The culture in New York, the drinking after work, you know, fast-paced life, waking up very early, going to sleep very late. And slowly, it's like when times are tough, you really know if you love something, right? I like to say it's like that's when you get tested. And if you love something and you believe in what you're doing, then you'll just keep going through the tough times, right? Uh, but after a couple of years, it started to wear on me, and I started really questioning like, what am I actually doing here? I would sit in front of like 8 screens per day, and it just started becoming very repetitive. I was doing quite well at the bank. I ranked top bucket, got a great bonus. I had a promotion coming up, and I really had to think. I was like, okay, is this the journey that I'm gonna go down for the next 10 years, or am I ready for a change? And that feeling just kept building and building and building, and I knew deep down in my gut, like instinctively, like this path wasn't for me. On paper, it was hard to turn that away. I had a great apartment. I was living at the time, had my girlfriend in New York, my best friends, my parents were happy. So like everything was like great. It's like, why would you upend all of that? And I ended up within the span of 2 weeks, uh, leaving my job, packing up all my things, basically telling everyone without warning, like my family and my friends and my community, and just moving to San Francisco. And I decided, uh, my place is in technology, my interest is in technology. This is what I want to be doing. This is what I want to be learning more about. I felt like I had developed a good enough toolkit to build from there. And I ended up joining a startup in business development, helping with operations, etc. And we were a startup of like 8 people. So it was a vastly different. I mean, Citigroup is hundreds of thousands of employees. I went from a very large structure to let's go for an ice cream break, 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. You know what I mean? It was like very like startup-y vibe. The CEO would cook for us in the kitchen, and you just felt like the engineering team was here, the sales was there, and everyone was like focused together. And that was really fun, and there was a lot of learnings. You know, the company was brand new basically, and so we had so many different pivots, and we were trying to build a business, and they basically trying to survive. And I just got to see all of that, like constant iteration, uh concept constantly needing to adapt. um, I stayed in that role for a little over a year before an investor came in and basically bought out the company, which was like very rapid turnaround. Uh, and I ended up having, you know, a liquidity event, and I found myself kind of back on the market, thinking like, okay, well, what am I gonna do now? You know, because the path of the company was like it kind of went its own way. And so I started looking at startups, and I was like, well, let me do some investing. You know, I have built a good network. I have a lot of time to go meet people and do all this kind of stuff. And you know, slowly through that, I got approached by this very large multifamily office that was looking to start a venture fund based out of the US, their European family office. And they were looking for people to help source, become venture partners, etc. So I ended up meeting one of the large partners, the people that was heading it, and we got along very well, and ended up joining their team. And that was probably one of the coolest experiences I've had in my life to date. You know, we were a team of 4 people going all around the US, meeting very large companies because it was a growth stage firm. And we were investing in like Airbnb, we were investing in like SpaceX, Open Door, all these companies before they went public, you know, and it was a lot of fun. Um, and then at the same time, you know, they would fly us to Europe. The company had a private jet. We would be flying to Saudi Arabia to meet the clients, flying to Lebanon. So it was like very cool, you know. And I was like, I couldn't believe that I had found myself in that role. But it turned out to be the role that taught me the most about investment management, about structuring, how to build a fund, how to build a thesis, how to go and execute on that thesis, everything from operations, fund administration, fundraising, you know. And the partner that I worked for was formerly at Tiger Global. And so it's like a very high pedigree. And I really loved the way he thought about investing, how to look at secular trends. And so till today, he's been one of my kind of best mentors for finding private market companies. Um, so built that business for some time. And as part of it, you know, we realized we needed to find some emerging managers, um, and we'll invest in their funds, and that way we'll be able to have co-investment strategies. Because like the biggest thing in when you're doing late stage investing is access to be directly on the cap table, because you don't want to go through anybody else. So the best way to build access is through relationships, and it's through time. So like, you know, let's find those early companies, early managers, get close to them, and then that will give us direct access to their best companies. And I would say the second major inflection point happened when one of the partners said, "Hey, I have this, you know, interesting emerging manager coming out of Boston. He has an interesting thesis." I invited them to come pitch us at the office. So we were in New York at the time, and my now partner walks in, and he opens up his laptop, and he had done this entire geographic mapping of the city of Boston, like all the universities, all the labs, all the corporates, what some of the biggest PhDs were working on. You know, he went really deep. He even tracked every innovation that came out of Boston since the 1800s. And he was just absolutely obsessed with the brain bank there, with deep tech, with infrastructure technology. You know, I mean, when you look at Boston, everything was invented out of Boston. The telephone, electricity, water sanitation, you know, the portable fax machine, the first inoculation of a vaccine, the foundations of the internet, all the way up to like color print and the first picture of a black hole. I mean, you name it, they built it. It's like powering modern civilization. And I thought it was a fascinating thesis, and it was a geographic thesis, right? He's like, I just want to own the Boston ecosystem. I just want to do deep tech. I want to help build the infrastructure of tomorrow. And so we got along. and we ended up kind of in a called mating dance for about a year or so before, we finally agreed. I said, hey, I'm ready to leave this firm. I'll join you at Blindspot and I'll help you launch this. I'll take care of all the funding. We'll build all the structure around it. Let's just go out there and execute that thesis. So I realized, like, my entire life has been a series of kind of leap of faiths. Either it turned out great or it seemed like a mistake at the time, but then something else opened up that was really good that emerged from that. And I'm happy to talk a little bit more about that journey. And then just to quickly wrap it up, because I know it's a long answer, I would say the third inflection point was when I met my jiu-jitsu master. It was a fellow by the name of Gregor Gracie. And I really started down my jiu-jitsu journey. I've been practicing for 5 years now. I have my purple belt. And that practice or that art opened up a whole new world for me. Everything from discipline to taking out the distractions in your life, to finding a community of people that are empowered and trying to support each other, to, taking out all the negative influences in my life, completely stopped drinking alcohol, for example, would go to bed very early to rest up. And jiu-jitsu taught me so much about the connection between life and spirituality, which I've now taken and applied that same pattern to all of my work and all of my interactions, that it's almost given me a kind of rebirth. And so I always say, I think the best kind of philanthropic work that I would like to get into would be to propagate jiu-jitsu academies and studios all around the world for kids, because it's the single greatest thing that has ever happened to me, in my opinion. It's one of the best arts, and it's life-changing. It's truly life-changing. It's very hard to describe it. But of course, I could talk about jiu-jitsu alone for hours. So I'll pause there. I know that was a long answer to your question.
Well, it's a fascinating answer. So I'm going to unpack or get into a little bit of detail with what you described. And you you left Saudi Arabia at 18 to go to George Washington University. And there you got a BBA in finance, graduated in summa cum laude, I believe, and you were at the Phi Kappa Alpha fraternity.
That was an interesting one. So, yeah.
Yeah, and the activities like Model United Nations, which you did at the American International School in Riyadh, right? Saudi Arabia before that, where you had this kind of UN kind of feel, right? So I can see that social side being part of your journey from early on. And I can see why you're part of the Vine, because that's about servant leadership and being thoughtful and realizing that we're in a community. It's not just sort of silos, and we kind of have to work together, respect each other. So I can see you having these early shaping parts of your journey, and then you get a job at Citibank, and that really awakens you to some of the kind of the investment side of it, or managing money, and you learn some skills there. But you start looking around. What I'm hearing from you is you're saying, do I not spend my whole life just looking at monitors and managing transactions and things like that? And you thought, that's not what I want. So then you end up at Silicon Valley, and then you get into a startup. And you think, wow, this is really quite exciting. It's really interesting. And I know when you do a startup, it's a very volatile and it's kind of chaotic, but you got to be a jack of all trades too, right? But it's really exciting. And then there's a liquidity event. And then from there, I can see how that can help shape you going into a family office where you've got, like these billions being managed by the family office. And then you get to see all of the entire ecosystem and the growth stage kind of investments that are being made, and you get some mentorship in that where you're learning all sorts of additional skills of managing money and managing funds and in this investment thesis idea, what's required to be a fund manager. And then serendipity happens where you meet your current partner, where you become a general partner of Blindspot Ventures. And this partner comes in and he's mapped this entire Boston ecosystem, the entire infrastructure. It goes back decades, like 100 years, and really understanding, what that next generation of infrastructure looked like, what the platforms look like, and things like that. And you go, and you kind of do this dance, right? And you realize, you know what, I want to partner with this person, and because that when you're a partner in a fund, it's like a marriage. so so
It goes longer than a marriage sometimes.
yeah, and definitely it could be even longer than marriage, right? And you're saying to the partner, you know what, I want to do business with you. I want to work with you. And because of all of your experiences, that you're saying, I'm going to take care of the funding. I'll raise the funds. Well, let's work together. We'll do amazing things together, and you can get very early on into merging startups, right? And that mentality, and guiding them along the way, and uh, and so during this whole process, you talk about in New York, you had a girlfriend. I don't know if that's the same one that you eventually married, and you recently got married as well, right? So,
Different one.
okay, and then of course you changed location because you want a great environment for the future, right? For you're recently married and your bride, and want a great environment, and so that's an amazing journey because you're not that old yet. Right.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when you summarize it like that, it's kind of interesting because you make it clear how everything links up. But when you're going through it, nothing is clear, and it just feels like a lot of unknown, a lot of uncertainty, sometimes a lot of doubt. I'll be the first one to admit it. I mean, it's not easy when you're kind of facing yourself and you're kind of going out on a path that is not as traditional or as expected, or when you're trying to build your own thesis and trying to make your own mark in the world. And so, with jiu-jitsu, just to quickly go back to that, I cannot emphasize enough how much mental and internal strength I was able to instill in myself through that practice, so that in those moments of doubt, I was always able to, and I continue to be, and I think it's something that we should always cultivate continuously, like a muscle that you train, where to kind of have to step back with a bit of self-awareness and say, are these thoughts and are these feelings serving me and serving what I'm trying to achieve and what I'm trying to build or what I'm trying to create, right? And if they're not, then they just have no place. And I'm not gonna power it with attention. I'm not gonna power it with thought, because you feed your thoughts, right? And they translate into feelings, and then feelings lead into action. And next thing you know, you change your reality all around you based on that one thought that you didn't maybe pay attention to. And so doubt and fear, they come hand in hand with everything that you do in life, and it's a healthy relationship of being able to manage it, and to instill belief in yourself at all times, no matter what. And that really just gets tested when things are tough, right? And that's when you need to double down, I feel, on yourself. And jiu-jitsu has been a very good practice that has translated into my work life, into my dealings with startups, because at the end of the day, you're not dealing with startups and companies, especially when you're an early stage investor. It's people, and people things that happen to them. Someone gets divorced, another person runs into a major issue. Things don't go as planned, and it is extremely volatile as well. And so to be a steady hand in times where people may be prone to panicking, I think that is often the deciding factor in what could be a really good outcome or not so good of an outcome, right? Because it's in our hands, right? We shape that. We shape our destiny. I'm a firm believer in that.
I can see how jujitsu has helped to give you grounding in maybe a spiritual sense, in a holistic sense, right? Because it's bigger than just one concept. It's a broad philosophy, and that philosophy can guide every aspect of your life. And there's integrity that's part of it. There's discipline that's part of it, but also respect and inclusion is part of that, and the centering, as I mentioned, and this kind of spiritual connection as well, all of which adds to the soulfulness that you have and being thoughtful of what you're doing and your work. But really, it's an integrated part of a much bigger system, and to realize that all of it come together to in unity and synchronicity and harmony and guiding you in your journey, in your family journey, but also in your business journey. So I could see that grounding aspect, and it's such a valuable part of your of who you are. But you love writing as a hobby, so are you going to be integrating that jujitsu philosophy and that grounding into your writing as a hobby?
You know, it's interesting you bring that up because it seems the only area in my life where I really lack discipline is in being able to consistently write. And when you're a writer, you need to consistently write, right? Like writers write. Um, I am making a better job of when I feel inspired to just immediately write it down because it's that feeling, right? It comes out of you. And so writing is an amazing form of expression. Uh, and I usually, I would say a lot of things and I would hear people respond to the things that I say. And it's like, oh, that's interesting, or that's really helpful, or thank you for saying that, or I really needed to hear that, or something along those lines. And I said, well, that just happened in one conversation really quickly, but I'm sure that it can help more people. But I also, this is the first interview I've ever done, Steven, just FYI. And by nature or by design, I don't know what it is. I'm always like quite incognito. Like I don't even have a Instagram. I don't have a personal Instagram, nothing. I mean, I have my LinkedIn because it's for work and things like that. But like, so I was like, what's a good way to express my writing that I think could be helpful to people? So I made an anonymous Twitter handle, and I just try to write. You know what I mean? And I'm not gonna advertise it because it's anonymous, so now it won't be anonymous. Maybe if you come across it one day, who knows? But uh, I like to express myself to that, and usually it's like a few lines of poetry or a few lines of expression or a thought that I had. You know, it can be like either a philosophical thought or a practical thought. But I find that it's helpful and it gives me a lot of mental clarity too. And in a sense, I think we're born to create. I had the honor and the privilege of meeting one of the world's greatest psychologists, Phil Stutz, and he talks about how there are two universes that we exist in simultaneously. One is the higher universe, is the universe of creation, and the other one is the material universe. And the material universe, the god is money, and in the higher universe, the god is creativity. And we're constantly balancing that duality, right? But when you serve the higher universe, it's when you're most in touch with the richness within, if you want to call it that, the real fulfillment. And so when we create, could be any form of creation, right? Writing, expressing, music, investing, structuring, everything. Um, then we have that sense of fulfillment because we're in that higher realm. And from that, things come. It's like a virtuous cycle. And so I really think it's important that everyone, every single day, even for a few minutes, try to create something with intention. And you'll see that compounds and serves you a lot.
That's really, really fascinating. And this creativity, higher part philosophy down to the sort of kind of the material side, and really the higher calling will lead to more fulfillment. But I could see that in your early life as well, right? Because when you were at the American International School, this Model United Nations at George Washington University, this Model United Nations, which is about the bigger universe. It's about the higher calling. But even when you're in high school, you're involved with this housing division sort of project in disadvantaged communities in the Philippines, right? So this commitment to social impact, which is really the higher calling, right? Outside of yourself to help others, to this kind of harmony of the universe and making sure it comes together. And I can see how that roots into how it fits into your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well. And then that's all part of where you're writing when you do write, it's about this connectivity and the higher purpose. And then I can see then in your early development of you talk about your time at Citibank, but you're also on the material side. But I could see maybe the grounding being part of that journey where you were with a Swiss-based portfolio company, I believe, right? Where you're doing stock research, portfolio recommendations, and Deutsche Bank, private wealth management. So you're analyzing things. But I'll bet you there's that holistic UN side that's always kind of there talking to you. Then you did a Hermes Holding, again, valuation comparative analysis, and that's helping you then when you get into Citibank, which then helps you into realizing when you're working with the multifamily office holdings and the things they're doing, and it gives you this realization. Then you are ready when your partner came up and said, hey, this is what I'm doing in terms of analysis of blind spots, that we can make a difference here. And it resonated with you. And then that's continuing this journey. And I can see why you're part of this Vine group. So do you think there's some element of fate driving you in this journey? And maybe there's an interview as well. It's the first interview you've done, but I get what you're doing, right? So
Yeah.
it was
I mean,
meant to happen, right?
I mean, it's really interesting because I never thought about it that way. But when you say it, I always did have kind of one foot in each world.
Yes.
And it does feel like that culminated into being able to merge the two finally, and that expressed itself through Blindspot, right? Where it took all the kind of analytics, operations, excellence, discipline of the investing and the finance world, married with purpose and intention and meaning and impact, and actually creating something that was long-term, successful, and impactful, right? And that shows itself in all of our portfolio companies. It's like I remember even in the conversations that I would have with my partner, it's like we don't like to invest in advertising tech. We think it's a crime that Facebook spends billions of dollars a year putting the best engineering minds in the world to figure out how to advertise better or how to do that kind of stuff. All of our things are about transformation, personal transformation, and then global transformation. And whether that's in the energy space, how do we think about the energy transition? What are the key infrastructure pieces required to actually run a fully renewable grid? Or on the compute space, like what are the philosophical implications for creating the first quantum computer? What does that mean? I think it'll be the largest breakthrough of our time since probably the invention of the nuclear bomb with Oppenheimer, right? Agriculture, food waste is the third largest contributor to carbon emissions in the world. We waste 40% of the food that we grow. How can we improve that? How can we improve our cold chain? How can we improve our supply chains so that we waste less, means we grow less, means we're more efficient, right? And so it doesn't matter what the industry is. It could be anything from biotech to fintech to agriculture. In all of it, it became about finding that meaning, that purpose, where on the thousandth night of like difficulty, you're still able to push through and help build a company, right? And believe me, commercializing hard tech, we very quickly learned it's so romantic on paper. It's like a romantic idea, we're going to change the world, we're going to do this. And then when it comes to reality, when it's like, okay, now build this, and then don't just build it, scale it and manufacture it, or integrate it, or apply it, um, it's hell. You know what I mean? And so you have to be a very steady hand. You have to be an incredible support, and you have to be able to iterate fast. Because if you want to realize your vision and you actually want to make a change and an impact, you have to know that it doesn't come easy, and it takes a lot more time than you think, but it's worth it. It's worthwhile to do that. What else are you here to spend your time doing? You know, if it's not to create something bigger than yourself, right? And so these are the thoughts and the things, the conversations I have with myself and with Ahmed all the time, you know, because we launched in 2018, and from 2018 to 2022, I mean, 2022 was a bonanza year, right? So, you know, we felt like, oh, we're deities, or we're like, we cracked the venture code, right? And then you really see like 2023, 2024, you know, liquidity gets tighter. People now look for, as they rightly should, self-sustaining companies, profitable. Like these metrics start to matter. So a company that could raise, you know, 50 million at a 200 million valuation on zero revenue, now they have 10 million of revenue and they're struggling to get a 30 million valuation, right? Because it's just a focus on foundations. And this is what builds great companies. But it was also a wake-up call to a lot of founders who, you know, were just feasting on the easy money. And it's like 24-hour term sheets. And now it's like, oh no, actually, reality is coming in much harder than everybody thought it would. And we don't know if it's going to get better or worse. We just know that right now we have to improve, because if we don't do something about it in this current environment, you know, we're going to start to see a lot more failures. And so it was really about rolling up our sleeves, getting more involved with the companies, supporting where we could, and continuing to invest, and bringing them to that place where they're in charge of their own destiny. And that gamified venture model, just raising the next round on milestones that continue to raise, kind of putting that away. You know, it's like we're not in school anymore. We're in real life, and real life demands your ability to be self-sustaining. And only from that place, which I think applies to individuals as well, you know, only from that place of filling your own cup can you then serve. And the greatest impact is service. So find a way to serve the most people, but the only way to get there is by serving yourself to the point where you don't need anything yourself. You're self-sustaining, right? And so that's been the kind of change and the inflection point that we're seeing in the venture world. And it's been a spiritual time for founders, I think, in general, you know, because it really forces people to look back and be like, okay, how are we going to get through this? And this is where the real fun starts, in my opinion, if you have the right kind of mindset. And these are exactly the challenges that we need to face to build multi-generational companies. So I don't know what the question was or how I went off on this tangent. I'm sorry for that, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what I was doing is kind of mining your background and how it lends you to where you are today. So what I'm hearing now is, as a founding managing director at Blindspot Ventures, you, a general partner, is that you really are behind purposeful leadership, purposeful innovation, purposeful investments in capital, purposeful, sustainable business, because it has to sustain. Otherwise, whatever innovation, no matter how frontier, remarkable, how game-changing it is, if it can't sustain, it won't have that lasting impact. So you have this purposeful mindset behind innovation, capital, leadership, and investments, and sustainable business. And with that mindset, then what I'm hearing you're saying is that, there was kind of this excitement time where, valuations didn't make any sense. So people could raise money, but now there's kind of a change, an inflection point in terms of how capital is raised, and then ensuring that that business is sustainable, and then that there's actually some revenue to back some of the valuations, and then that revenue can scale. And what I'm also hearing is you're not a financial investor. You're a strategic investor. You're rolling up your sleeves and you're trying to help guide your portfolio company so they can sustain and grow their revenues and scale. And that's the reality. And in a way that makes for better portfolios. Did I miss something in that kind of summary of what you were saying?
I think it's important just to add that, you know, the greatest support that any venture fund can do, in my opinion, is to be, you know, there for the founder, both on a business level and on an individual level. So it's like, who's the first phone call that your founder is going to make on a Sunday night when he thinks everything is going to hell? You know, because, you know, venture funds, especially early stage funds that have portfolios of 80 to 100 companies, it's just become a system. You kind of lose the humanity in all that volume, you know. For us, we always kind of took the opposite approach. You know, we'd invest in 2 to 3 new portfolio companies per year. So in call it the 5, almost 6 years of deployment, we have around close to 20 portfolio companies. So that's manageable for us in terms of being able to have deep interpersonal relations with all of our founders. And that's important for our work. Because at the end of the day, you know, the founder is on the hero's journey, and he's doing probably the hardest thing possible that any person can do, right? Like, as a venture fund, we can say, yeah, our job is hard, we're doing deep tech, it takes a lot of time, commercialization is a nightmare. We have a portfolio, right? A founder is dedicated his entire life into this pursuit. You know what I mean? Especially a founder with a PhD background who spent 10 years studying what he wants to do, and then he's going and commercializing it. And so that's a level of dedication and a level of commitment that you're all in. And when you're all in, the stakes are so high that volatility really can have an impact on you. And if a venture firm fails to see that from a compassionate or empathetic point of view, and they're just thinking about, where's my money? This, I have to return. Where's the progress? Where's the growth? And they actually fail to see the human story that's evolving as importantly, if not more importantly, then I think you have a lot of missed opportunity and a lot higher chance for things going wrong, right? And when things go right, you want to have known that you were there as well along the way. You know what I mean? And so for us, it's like, yeah, it's just acknowledging like, hey man, you're doing something very difficult. Thank God that it's a big impact and meaningful. That's what gets you through it. And we're here. Just tell us, be transparent with us. You know, a lot of founders as well, you know, we started off this call even talking about like our childhood and all these things. And it's not something that I think about, you know, but I know that it affects everything. And when you were able to lay it out, I can see how things converge and evolve and grow. It's the same thing with our founders, you know. Each one has their own childhood. Some are great childhoods, some are traumatic childhoods. That comes out in the boardroom. Sometimes, you know, they don't want to tell you what's wrong because they want to please the VC. It's almost like a father figure in a sense, you know, but that's an unhealthy relationship to have. You know, the best things, the best kind of relationship is about transparency. It's like walking and being like, hey, look, I have 5 things that are problematic that I'm working on that you're aware of. There are 3 that you don't know about, and one of them can kill us if we don't figure this out quick. Love your ideas, right? And being able to communicate with that vulnerability with enough time ensures that we can come together as a team and as a village and build this. But when founders feel isolated and like, oh, I have to go report to my VC, I have to go report to my investors, and then they're shouldering all of this, and then they're shouldering the weight of everything that they're trying to build and their employees. It's too much. It's too much for one person to handle, in my opinion, you know? And so the job of a venture capitalist should be to 100% support the founder in their journey and make it founder first. That's your primary stakeholder. And when you do that, I think the returns come, they speak for themselves, and you're able to kind of fulfill your duty to your LPs. But if the founder collapses, the whole business collapses, because companies are just people at the end of the day, right? And I feel like that point is often missed, and it needs to be kind of emphasized more and more, especially for VCs that are up and coming, or emerging managers. It's something to really think about. You know, your founders are your best friends, and that's how it has to be viewed.
I guess that puts in the higher calling as well. Your founders are your family, basically, and whatever challenges and opportunities, rewards, and not that come in that life family member's journey, you're there to help, or help them, as and it could be her, him, you know, whatever that diverse sort of spectrum of what that founder can be, and you're there with them during that journey. So that definitely makes you a strategic investor, because you care about their success, and both personally, but also on the business side. And ultimately, whatever happens on the business side, they have a life journey, and you want to help them ultimately in that higher calling, that life journey. So that's to be applauded and quite remarkable, and something that you want to propagate in the world, right? Because then you're having an impact in a much broader sense. And I can see that as part of your journey from when you were very young, and it's continuing as you're as a founding GP, managing director of Blindspot Venture. So thank you for this commitment to the success of the ecosystem as well, right? Because you got a holistic view of helping the ecosystem of venture and founders and being on their journey. So let's kind of go into a slightly different topic area. Well, maybe not so slight a different topic area, but we're in this remarkable change that's happening, you know, with the introduction of generative AI back in, you know, November-ish of 2022, and then 4.0 GPT-4 came out in 2023, and now Omni came out earlier this year, and then there's this big announcement that's coming up probably in about 2 or 3 weeks time. And even 4.0, the whole version already being tested, but not everybody has access. And then this announcement of something called Orion or GPT Next, or whatever the next version is, with maybe 100 times more capable. Where do you think all of that's going to head? And then I'm going to get to quantum, because you earlier in our conversation you mentioned quantum, and you think there's some remarkable things. So where that's going to go, and then, you know, biotech, chip technologies, and where that's going to go. So we got a lot of sort of futuristic topic areas to do in the next few minutes. So first of all, where is generative AI going? Is it going to be AGI? Is it going to be Kurzweil, the singularity, or is nearer? Not just near, but nearer in 2029. So that's soon. Do you think that AGI is going to be within the next few years, or do you think that's a bigger concept? So your feelings on, or your crystal ball on generative AI, where is that?
Yeah. So let's assume a time frame of over the next 5 years, right? Which is not that far off, right? The way I see it, based on the confluence of many different industries coming together, it's almost like if you look at biotech, for example, the cost of genomic sequencing has gone down drastically to the point where now everybody can affordably sequence their genome, right? To the hardware propagation, where everyone has their own personal hardware or assistant with them, right? I kind of see a world where AI becomes part of edge compute, and you are the edge as the human. You know what I mean? And whether it's as a audible in your ear, or an implant in your brain with what Neuralink is trying to do, and a few other companies, I believe that AI becomes your hyper personalized assistant in life, and she or he or it can tell you, based on continuous evaluation of you and your health and your habits and your calendar and your routine and how you speak and what you like and where you live, what time to go to sleep, where to take this person out for a coffee, for example, because it interacts with that person's AI and knows, okay, this person is lactose intolerant and vegan, or for example. So it just becomes, it schedules your day and orders and structures your life based on what is optimized for your existence, right? And it just becomes that interactive assistant. That's how I see it on a consumer level. Now, in order to power a world like that, you need a tremendous amount of compute infrastructure and energy infrastructure, which in the world today we do not have, right? Um, just looking at the grid, for example, right? Uh, about 3% of the US grid is based on data center demand. That's about to go to 8% over the next few years. That's a massive tailwind of just data centers crunching and consuming electricity, right? The current systems that we have today, GPUs, CPUs, I don't think they're going to be enough to power that kind of an AI or an AGI, if you want to call it that. And this is where the advent of a quantum computer becomes really interesting, because the world as a secular trend is heading in two main ways, right? Energy and compute infrastructure, because they feed each other, right? The compute needs the energy, right? And so there's a lot of things in the energy play that are happening, whether it's big battery storage companies, small modular nuclear reactors to help supply the grid, more wind and solar, hydrogen, all of these other technologies that are coming, right, to create the energy infrastructure and the supply necessary to feed these systems. And these systems are going to be very large compute systems. Right now, you have NVIDIA, we have Cerebras, you have Grok, all these big companies that are emerging. But the real category change or the inflection point, I think, will be when we create our first functioning 1 million qubit quantum computer. And based on that compute, plus the energy infrastructure we would have built, we will be able to literally create magic where it almost feels sentient, it feels conscious, it becomes its own thing. It might even very well become conscious. I have no idea, Stephen. I just think that we probably live in the most interesting times in recorded human history to date. And we are literally having a front row seat to what I think is a step change in the evolution of our civilization, which is remarkable, incredible, maybe a little terrifying, but we signed up for this, right? And so that's how I see things going. I just know it's going to be interesting, and maybe as a backup plan, buy a farm and grow your own food. But definitely there's a lot more entertainment to come, in my view.
Okay, so I'm kind of mindful of the time, and so I'm just going to do a quick, real live. This is like a live we're recording, so there's no editing of this. But are you time constrained? In other words, we only have like 5 minutes left, or can you go beyond?
I can go a little bit beyond. It's not a problem. Yeah.
Okay, because you said a lot. So
Yeah, yes.
yeah. Okay, so you're talking about the rapid escalation of AI and where that's going, but it's tied in with compute and there's things like quantum computing. So there's this convergence of the digital, physical, and the biological that's happening in real time. So like you said, we have a front row seat in all of this. And it sounds like you believe the scaling laws are going to continue to apply. The scaling laws are, you have these AGI, you have these large language models. There's some hybrid attempts now, like with algebraic new models and things like that, that maybe are better than transformers. And but the scaling laws are saying, as you continue to escalate on the data, continue to escalate on the computing and the AI, it's going to continue to grow. We're going to have amazing capabilities, but they're also saying that the constraints are, it requires more energy, and we don't have enough GPUs and things like that to kind of match the demand of where AI is going. However, there's a magic bullet. That magic bullet is really quantum computing, but maybe it's quantum supercomputing. And that is the convergence of supercomputers, which are exascale, which exascale is a billion operations per second. I believe they're going to go zettascale, right? Which is a trillion billion operations per second. And we already have exascale like Frontier at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. So we have these things that are already beyond measure, already there. And if you apply AI exascale, they're already exceeding, let's say, 100 exaflops. So they're heading to zetta, a trillion, if you just look at the AI part of it, because you don't need as much computing power to do AI as you do to full floating point operations, right? And then you combine that with quantum. And in fact, I just did an interview yesterday with the CEO, Elias Khan of Quantinuum. And Quantinuum has done this great a bunch of breakthroughs with Microsoft. 800 times less errors, April announcement, 3 nines fidelity shortly thereafter. They're now experimenting with 5 and 6 nines fidelity. And they're predicting universal quantum by 2029. They actually went formally out with the roadmap saying, this is what we're going to achieve. And that speaks to your quantum being the, a million qubits, but you need a million physical qubits to get maybe 100 logical qubits, right? With error correction or whatever. So they're saying that they're going to have enough logical qubits that you can solve real practical problems and be to demonstrate it. And Microsoft has released these systems to be able to do some of this, like a zero quantum elements. So that's quite magical, and there's evidence to suggest everything you're saying is going to happen. So I love the fact that you're willing to go out on the limb and say, you know what, we're at the front lines, and then you have this biomedical innovation, right? Where I'm on the leadership board at the Karasaki Institute. We're doing all sorts of amazing things in biomedical innovation, but you see Harvard and David Sinclair, what he's doing, but also Altos Labs is kind of stealth with Yamanaka and what they're doing. So we could be at this frontier, and Kurzweil alludes to this too, right? That we're of the generation that you can now live forever. In fact, I just did an interview just before this one where a futurist is saying he just attended some kind of symposium, and they're saying, think of the year 800 years into the future. And he's kind of saying, well, what does that mean? Well, it's because you're going to live for the next 5-10 years. You're going to now live to be 800 years into the future. So basically, we're going to have unlimited lifespan.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that? Do you think, so I actually support everything you're saying, just because of the series of interviews I've been doing and the evidence is supporting everything you're saying. And so we're going to solve the energy problem. And we got these new chips that consume 1,000 times less power and they're 2,500 times more energy efficient. And Philip Wong is talking about having a 1 million transistor GPU within the next few years, but using its new kinds of technology, which consumes much less energy. And you have silicon solar cells using perovskite. So, where maybe we can get 40% efficiency. So again, and like you said, small nuclear reactors, so new kinds of energy sources, fusion coming online, and then quantum again, and this quantum supercomputer where you got these hybrid systems, you can have all these magical solutions. And then on the biotech side, do you think that's going to happen? Do you think we're going to be to live? You and I, even though I'm much older than you, I'm young enough that I'm going to now have the option to live forever. Do you think that's going to happen?
It's a tough question. I remember
the option.
Yeah, I mean, I read something interesting that said that the first person who's probably going to live forever is already born or already alive today, right?
I'd say that's us too.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't know what the solution for biodegradation is, but I do know that if we were to do that, there would be some combination of man and machine, right? Another philosophical question, which I find interesting, and this kind of leads to the point, is that what happens when all of our LLMs and AI models map out every single piece of content that has created in human history? Let's say we just map the entire internet, right? So there's nothing to train anymore, right? We've trained on all the data that we've ever created. Where do we go from there? You know, what does that look like? And this is where the addition of quantum computing becomes interesting, right? Like, what happens when we start to create inference, communication between all of the knowledge combined of human existence, almost like a hive or a one mind situation, right? And then for us as people, are we willing to live forever in a drastically different environment, right? Like, you know, having your consciousness either transferred to another biology, is that still you? I don't know. Know what I mean? Also, what does the planet look like in 50 or 100 years' time? I mean, it's getting real hot around here. You know what I mean? We have so much potential and ability as humans, but there are still major existential threats that we need to address, right? It's like, what's the point of living forever if it's in a planet that's dead, right? Or not hospitable to us, right? And so it also begs the question of nature versus nurture, right? Because we know we can clone, right? Like, we've done that. We've successfully cloned today, right? So what happens if I clone you? Is it still you experiencing you? Or if we really want to go to the higher question, are you and me just the same thing experiencing different perspectives, and we're actually all one thing experiencing everything? And so we already do live forever. I know I really want, but
So, you bring up these good points about the existential threats to us, but keep in mind, if we get quantum supercomputing, which is really this hybrid system that may be analog with quantum, with supercomputers and AI machine learning all combined and working in unison, then that's going to come up with some novel solution in terms of climate. It's going to come up with novel solutions in terms of energy that we can't even conceive of. We can't even imagine. It's so beyond our capabilities. So those solutions can intercede to solve all of these sort of what we consider to be, food security and all of these other issues that we're thinking in classical terms as problems. But when you get this new paradigm of problem solving on board, it'll solve these kinds of problems, right? And then you get to the question of consciousness. And if you look at Penrose, and for decades he's putting up this idea that maybe consciousness is like a principle of the universe and it's everywhere and it just orchestrated in us. But you see, maybe there's some kind of computational capabilities and everything. It may not be human, but it's there. I guess there's a lot of questions, but maybe these questions will be solved. These multidimensional aspects of their existence will be solved by this new paradigm of capability and quantum supercomputing. Do you think that there is a solution in quantum computing? And even though we think there's existential threats and this other dimensionality of what human existence, they're going to be addressed by this inflection point of all this capability, that what we think is not can be solved becomes solvable in some sense.
I think absolutely we have the tools today, and we are building the tools that will allow us to address and fix every single issue we could possibly face as a species. That categorically, without a doubt, I have a belief in our ability, if we don't have the tool already, to create the tool. But what needs to be matched with equal importance, if not more importance, right? Have you ever heard the most dangerous thing in the world is all the power without the wisdom to wield it? There needs to be a matching on the level of human consciousness as well, so that we are using our tools effectively, right? And what does that mean?
And that goes to your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right?
Yeah.
the philosophy, the grounding, that spiritual aspect, right? So,
Yeah, it's I'll tell you one of the amazing things about jiu-jitsu, right? Everybody is barefoot on the mats. When you
yes.
step on the mat, you shake everybody's hand. It doesn't matter if he's a billionaire hedge fund manager or if he just got out of prison. Everybody is equal on the mat. It's a pure meritocracy, and we all see each other as comrades, as one unit in this practice that we're going through together. And until we start to have that same perspective as humans on this planet, that it's not about actually borders or division or religion or ideology or politics, but the fundamental truth is that we are one species, all of us together on this rocket ship through space, which is an incredible existence. And until we start to treat each other with that deep level of compassion, empathy, where I see you as me and you see me as you, and we're in this together and actually growing in that, call it wisdom or love or whatever that might be, only then will we be able to use these incredible tools that we've created to the benefit of everyone and for the prosperity of everyone, right? I think the biggest issue we face today as people, and I see this reflected in so many instances in society, is just constant division and distraction. And and that is a sad state of affairs because it is not serving us in creating the world we all claim we want to be creating. You see? And so we can build the most magical tools, but if we're not able to wield them responsibly, ethically, empathetically, then there's no point.
Yeah, and really that's the higher calling, right? Critical thinking about empathy and the ability to have agency, but working collectively with agency as well, and respect and inclusion, and it gets back to your center point where you're saying the importance of jiu-jitsu has been through your whole life when you reflect back, and it's this grounding element, and that could be the grounding element for a journey in the next a few years, because it's not 100 years from now, it's a few years, right? You know, you've given us so much during this interview. This is just my last final question, and thank you for going a few minutes over. And that is, what recommendation would you give to the audience, and or questions you want to give the audience?
Recommendation or questions. Okay. I would say you're truly not alone in your journey. I think everybody believes they're alone because each person has their own unique set of circumstances, but the same patterns apply to all of us. I think find a practice that serves you and builds you and makes you better, and that will translate into better in all other aspects of your life. There's nothing wrong with being vulnerable and admitting that to yourself, but there is something wrong with talking down to yourself and being mean to yourself and doubting yourself. That won't serve you. So think of yourself as truly the creator. You create always with every thought that you have, with every feeling that you experience, and with every action that you take. And so the greatest superpower you can cultivate is your self-awareness and your ability then to guide your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions into creating the world and the reality that you want to exist in, that you choose for yourself. That's why we're here. Take joy in the process. I guess that's what I would say. Some final comments.
Well, I really thank you for that, Assad, and you live that as well, right? So, based on your experience and as you continue to contribute in such profound ways, I thank you for a soulful, deep, engaging discussion. Just I really enjoyed our time together, and look forward to future engagement. So, thank you again for coming in and sharing your insights with my audience.
Likewise, Stephen. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.